Alright, YouTube, let's get back into it. Another standard deck tech here for Rivals of Ixalan Standard. So far we have had Vampires and Merfolk. The response has been pretty great so far to both of them. I wanted to do an update for a deck that I did last Standard with Ixalan Standard that I think was my favorite to play of the decks that I had put together for that Standard. And I think we got a couple new tools, and we can tune the deck in such a way where we can actually make it a little bit closer to competitive and a little bit more where it needed to be. I think the tools we got are very interesting and effective, and I think we could start leveraging some of the older standard cards in conjunction with them to do a good thing for the deck. So, with that being said, here we are on Esper Control. Those who watched the previous Esper Control video, this deck is very similar. However, we have two new cards, and I think these two new cards may push it over the top a little bit. At least make it better than it was last time, and I actually had a lot of fun playing it last time, so we'll get through the lands first. We're on 4 plains, 5 islands, 4 swamps. Plains is the least important basic land here. White is our splash color, really. And then we're on 1 Concealed Courtyard, an Irrigated Farmland. We have a couple Fetid Pools, 4 Drowned Catacomb, 4 Glacial Fortress. The mana for Esper is actually pretty decent. It would be nice to have access to a couple more reasonable dual lands that didn't come into play tapped. But, I mean, we have the cycling and the check lands. It's not too bad. Then we'll get into the threat package. We're on 3 gearhulks of the torrential variety this time. 1 hostage taker, which I still like, but I think is a little less good than everybody thought it was. 2 Scarab Gods, which are outstanding, of course, dominant in the previous standard. And then we're on 1 of Approach of the Second Sun. I didn't want to be all in on the Approach plan, but there's a new card that enables us to do some cool stuff with Approach. So I thought it would be a good include here. And just another way to just come out of nowhere and just win the game. Then we're on 3 copies of Opt and a single Fatal Push as our turn 1 plays. We're on 2 Search for Azcantas. This card's amazing. It's great in every format going all the way back to Legacy. I see this as a player in Standard for the remainder of the time it's in Standard. And then it'll be evergreen, just great in every format it's in. It's already kind of taking Modern by storm. But very good card. A couple of Vraska's Contempt. And then we're on 4 Censor, 3 Supreme Will, and a Disallow as our counters package. We're on 3 Glimmer of Genius for our card filtering and card draw, card advantage engine. We're on a singleton of Cast Out. And then we have 2 Fumigate and 1 Settle the Wreckage. I like Settle the Wreckage a lot, but its anti-synergy with the Scarab God makes it so we just want 1 of. 2 Fumigates is good, though. Allows us to recoup some life and try to stay in a game when otherwise we might not be able to. Obviously, sweepers and control decks are good. It's not really that difficult to explain, or that foreign of a concept. Then, we're on 2 of Ravenous Chupacabra, which is a threat and a removal spell, and it costs 4 mana, so it's better than the Noxious Gearhulks we were playing before. And it does a lot in conjunction with the Scarab God. We can cast it on turn 4, take out a threat, chump block with it to save our life total, and then later in the game when we get a Scarab God into play, we just reanimate this thing, kill another thing, have a 4/4, and kind of do it all over again. So this card is great. I think it's the perfect addition to this sort of deck, especially since we're going more all-in on the Scarab God. It's kind of the reason to go more all-in on the Scarab God. And then Masterminds Acquisition. This is the card that really intrigued me to play Esper and to try to tune the deck differently. And that's why some of my numbers are kind of funky. I usually am a fan of mostly 4-ofs, and if you have a couple flex spots, some just role-playing cards to fill the space. But with 3 of these in our deck, this allows us to do stuff like have 1 of Cast Out, because we just go get our Cast Out. Obviously, 4 mana is a lot, but when we're trying to grind a game out and make it last as long as possible and to take control and kind of run away with the game once we hit a Scarab God or a gearhulk, this allows us to do a lot. It allows us to build our sideboard in such a way as where we can have a lot of 1-ofs, and we have kind of the ability to go wish for anything we want and go grab a card and put it in our hand. We don't have to reveal to our opponent, which is very, very key here. And then the Diabolic Tutor mode allows us to do the same for anything in our deck. I think this card's really good. Cards like the Magic Origins Tutor with Spell Mastery, the black one, I can't remember the name of, that gave you 3 mana if you had Spell Mastery, saw some play as a 1-of. We're kind of going deep on this card and going as a 3-of. And the cool thing that this allows us to do is trim numbers elsewhere. So we only have to play 1 Cast Out because we can go get it. Same thing with our sweepers, we could trim on one of those. This allows us to go grab a Vraska's Contempt if we have to deal with a troublesome Planeswalker. And my favorite mode on this card is we pay 4 mana and we either go get a win condition, a gearhulk, a Scarab God, a hostage taker, whatever, or we just play the dirtily control game and we cast Approach of the Second Sun and we put that down onto the 7th card of our deck or whatever, and our opponent is thinking, well, I have 7 turns to figure this out or they're going to win the game. And then we just cast Masterminds Acquisition and go snag Approach of the Second Sun out of our sideboard and just win the game within 2 turns. So we don't have to build a deck like the blue-white Approach deck where we're purposefully like milling ourselves with Ipnu Rivulets and trying to dig deep very fast. We just approach, Masterminds Acquisition, grab approach again, win the game. And if this doesn't resolve, we still have the fallback plan of catching the original approach on top of our deck, 7 cards down. So that is my favorite part of it, and that's the part that I saw to be the most interesting. Otherwise, we have in our sideboard a pair of Fatal Pushes. This just comes in against mono red. Merfolk is going to be a thing. We're not really triggering the Revolt on it, so we're not killing anything too big too often. But I think Merfolk's going to be a deck. I think Vampires are going to be a deck. Teamer Energy is still a deck. Fatal Push is still really good. So we have 2 of there in addition to the 1 in our main deck. We're on a counters package of 2 Negate, a Spell Pierce, and 2 Essence Scatter. These, the Negates and Spell Pierce obviously come in control match, and then the Essence Scatters are going to be our mid-rangey creature deck match, and some combination of all of them in some matches. Then we're on 3 Authority of the Consuls. This is the mono-red / Merfolk, if we could slow down the tempo of Merfolk, gain some life, and Vampires and stuff like that. That's when those come in. It's pretty obvious. It's been that way for some time now in white decks. We have the 3rd Vraska's Contempt, which we can go snag with our acquisition. We have an Ixalan's Binding, which could be a cast out as well, either way, which we can go snag with our Masterminds Acquisition. So if we have a problematic Planeswalker, we have 2 sideboard answers that we can go wish for. We have 1 other Ravenous Chupacabra. There's matches where I can see this card being very good, or if we want to go tutor for the additional one after we've grinded out, but honestly, this is just sort of the mid-range sort of buff that our deck needs, I think, to play more of a middle game before we get to the Scarab God and Torrential Gearhulk. Then we have one more Fumigate, just the fourth sweeper that we can go tutor for. And then, of course, the second approach that I've already talked about. This deck is super sweet. I played a match or two with it so far. I didn't put as deep of testing into it because it's basically the same deck as the previous one, but with a couple updates, and I liked the previous deck. So this is where we're at. I think this card's really good, and it's really going to help control decks quite a bit. Whether it be Esper, like you see here, or Grixis. I really like the interaction with Approach. Allowing you to keep your other approach in your sideboard is really neat, and just giving you good value on top of good value. I could see adjusting some of these numbers a little bit, but I wanted to at least have a few of these to play with and to allow us just the sort of diversity of answers that we're allowed to play with now that we have such a card to go get it. That being said, the deck itself is very sweet. I hope that we can keep it as a viable option in the upcoming standard, and that the tribal decks don't quite run away with it, although I hope they are good too. Anything that's not Temur Energy is going to be pretty fun to play with in standard. So I look forward to it, guys. Let me know what you think below. I'll link a couple other deck techs down below, and you can go in one of the top corners of your screen and click the subscribe button. We do a lot of deck techs, a lot of standard content, a lot of legacy content, a lot of modern content, some discussions, some other stuff. Sometimes I just jump on and ramble and throw it up there because I like the conversation with you guys. So I appreciate everything, and I hope to talk to you guys again very soon.